What if the difference between an ordinary mind and an extraordinary one has nothing to do with intelligence at all? Consider this. The same sky that inspired Galileo to question the heavens hangs above every one of us every single night. The same falling apple that prompted Newton's theory of gravity has fallen countless times before, unnoticed, unremarkable. The same human body that Leonardo da Vinci dissected with obsessive wonder has been observed by physicians for centuries. The raw material of reality is identical for everyone. And yet, throughout history, a rare few have looked at this same material and extracted insights that reshape civilization. This is the paradox we must confront. Genius is not about access to more information. It is about a fundamentally different relationship with the information already in front of us. Most human minds operate on inherited assumptions. From childhood, we absorb a vast, invisible architecture of accepted truths handed down by culture, education, and social consensus. This architecture is efficient. It allows us to function without constantly re-deriving the rules of existence. But efficiency comes at a cost. The moment we accept an idea as settled, we stop examining it. We stop asking whether it is actually true or merely familiar. This is the trap of the ordinary mind, mistaking familiarity for understanding. Great thinkers operate differently. They treat so-called obvious truths not as conclusions, but as invitations to inquiry. When Einstein imagined riding alongside a beam of light, he was not accepting the physics of his era as fixed. He was interrogating it, turning it over, asking what most people considered unaskable. When Darwin spent years observing finches, barnacles, and orchids, he was not simply cataloging nature. He was quietly dismantling the assumption that species were fixed and unchanging. This capacity is not a personality trait reserved for the fortunate few. It is a discipline, a deliberate, repeatable orientation toward the world. Curiosity, in this sense, is not childlike wonder. It is a rigorous refusal to let assumptions go unexamined. Closely tied to this discipline is a method known as first principles thinking. Rather than reasoning by analogy comparing a new problem to something familiar and borrowing its solution, exceptional minds break a problem down to its most fundamental, undeniable truths and reason upward from there. This is slower. It is more demanding. But it is precisely what allows for insights that conventional reasoning could never reach, because conventional reasoning is bound by the limits of what has already been thought. And perhaps most striking of all is the great thinker's relationship with uncertainty, where most minds rush toward resolution seeking the comfort of an answer, any answer. To escape the discomfort of not knowing, exceptional thinkers linger in ambiguity. They tolerate the unresolved for longer. They resist the premature closure that ends inquiry before it has truly begun. This tolerance for uncertainty is not indecision. It is strength disguised as patience. It is the willingness to remain in the question long enough for a truer answer to emerge, rather than settling for the first available one. Taken together, these are the foundations of exceptional perception. A refusal to accept the obvious without examination, a commitment to reasoning from fundamental truths, and a rare comfort with not yet knowing. But perception alone is not enough. Seeing differently is only the beginning. The question that remains is this: how does this altered way of seeing get translated into insight, innovation, and lasting impact? Seeing differently is only half the story. A mind can perceive the world with rare clarity and still produce nothing of consequence if that perception is never converted into action. The thinkers history remembers were not simply better observers. They were architects of a specific set of habits that turned raw insight into lasting contribution. The first of these habits is what we might call deliberate trespassing, the practice of crossing intellectual borders that most people treat as fixed. Alexander Fleming did not discover penicillin by studying medicine alone. His breakthrough emerged from noticing an accident and refusing to dismiss it as irrelevant to his field. Steve Jobs famously credited a calligraphy course, of all things, with shaping the typography that would later define personal computing. The pattern is unmistakable. Exceptional thinkers refuse to stay confined within a single discipline. They borrow structures from biology to understand economies. They borrow principles from music to understand mathematics, and in doing so, they generate connections that specialists, trapped inside their own narrow expertise, simply cannot see. The second habit is a controversial one in a culture addicted to constant stimulation: productive solitude. We are taught to equate progress with activity, input, and collaboration. Yet nearly every transformative idea in history has required a period of withdrawal, a deliberate retreat from noise. Newton developed much of his most important work during a period of forced isolation away from Cambridge. This is not solitude as escape. It is solitude as incubation, a space where scattered observations are given the silence they need to arrange themselves into something coherent. The third habit is subtler and perhaps more radical: the questioning of the question itself. Most problem-solving begins by accepting the problem as it has been framed. Exceptional thinkers pause at this very first step and ask whether the frame is even correct. When engineers were struggling to build faster elevators, the conventional question was, how do we make the elevator move faster? The more useful question, it turned out, was, how do we make the wait feel shorter? The addition of mirrors in elevator lobbies, giving people something to do while waiting, solved the real problem far more effectively than any mechanical upgrade could. This is the essence of reframing: solving the right problem rather than perfecting the answer to the wrong one. The fourth habit is the willingness to hold contradiction without flinching. Ordinary thinking seeks quick resolution, forcing a choice between two competing ideas as soon as tension appears. Exceptional thinkers do the opposite. They hold opposing truths in the mind simultaneously, allowing the friction between them to generate something neither idea could produce alone. Niels Bohr captured this precisely when he observed that the opposite of a small truth is false, but the opposite of a great truth may very well be another great truth. Progress often lives not in choosing a side, but in the tension itself. What unites every habit we've explored across these two parts: curiosity as discipline, first principles reasoning, tolerance for uncertainty, cross-domain thinking, solitude, reframing, and comfort with contradiction, is a single, quiet truth. None of it requires exceptional circumstances. It requires exceptional intention. This way of seeing is not reserved for names etched into history books. It is available right now to anyone willing to slow down long enough to question what they've been told is obvious. So here is the question worth carrying with you. What assumption have you accepted as fixed, one you've never actually stopped to examine? And what might you see if you finally did?